Liberty Counsel's lawsuit forces a public library to change its policy. Hi, I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. We'll talk about this with Matt Barber, the vice president of Liberty Counsel Action. This policy, Matt, in Portland, Oregon, or near Portland, Oregon, Seaside Library is what it's called, is a policy that is unfortunately in many different libraries across the country. Why these different libraries don't take an affirmative approach to affect and correct these policies is beyond me. But this policy restricted religious speech and political speech within the public library. You couldn't use the common facility to do any kind of religious message, which would include prayer, but you could speak on other topics. And now, of course, we've got a great resolution because Liberty Counsel filed a lawsuit, and ultimately this case was resolved.
Yeah, the library rather seemed to hang its hat on the notion that they were somehow it was permissible for them to prohibit proselytizing, which is still protected speech. They have an idea that somehow if a person is coming in and sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, that they can somehow discriminate against that individual and restrict them from using the library property. Here, the judge, as we told them and warned them on several occasions, they were way out of line. They were violating Liberty Counsel's constitutional rights, certainly. And the judge has slapped them with a pretty good, hefty fine.
Yeah, in fact, what we ultimately did now is we filed the federal lawsuit, and they agreed to resolve it. And so now the judge has ultimately ordered the library to pay a $10,500 penalty or fee to Liberty Counsel. In addition to that, they've also paid the attorney's fees for Liberty Counsel. So this was quite an expensive mistake for this library, but they should be on notice because these kinds of situations, of all places in a public library, ought to be places where if you can read the book on politics or religion in your carrel by yourself, even maybe talk to someone privately by your carrel, you ought to be able to take it into the common community room where you can meet with more than one or two or three people and talk about the same content of the book. Yeah. It makes no sense for a library to say that you can use their community room for everything but religious viewpoints and religious messages.
Well, in the whole resolution of this, I think there are several benefits here. First of all, obviously, justice was served, and we're not just sharing this story to toot our own horn and say, yes, Liberty Counsel has had yet another victory. That's true. But the real, I think, benefit of this is that we can share this story publicly with, and hopefully other people associated with other libraries will sit back and recognize what's happening here, and maybe they can save themselves some serious headache by complying with our United States Constitution and not buying into the disinformation that anti-theist and atheist groups and groups like the American Civil Liberties Union put out there, which encourage libraries to discriminate against people based on their sincerely held religious beliefs under this kind of newfangled notion of so-called, quote, separation of church and state.
Well, in fact, the library in this case, of course, they've not only been ordered, but the policy's been changed. The policy originally said that you could use the library rooms for various kinds of meetings, except you could not have religious services or proselytizing. And so when Benjamin Boyd, on behalf of Liberty Counsel, actually applied to use the facility, part of what his message stated, or his application, was that he wanted to have a meeting, and it was for Liberty Counsel, to help mold children into responsible and respectable citizens by shaping their moral consciousness from a Christian and biblical viewpoint. When they saw a Christian and biblical viewpoint, they ultimately said, no, you can't be here. It's denied because you can't use it for religious services or proselytizing. It's unbelievable. But that's, in fact, what happened. You could shape them to be moral citizens, but not from a religious perspective, I guess.
Well, specifically, not from a Christian and biblical viewpoint. And the mere fact that we use the actual language viewpoint is a bit ironic, because what we're talking about here specifically is viewpoint discrimination, which the Supreme Court has said is unconstitutional. So in those 4 words, from a Christian and biblical viewpoint, that we kind of put the library on notice here that they absolutely cannot discriminate, and there was some wrangling that went back and forth, and we made this very clear to them, but they did not give for quite a while until finally they threw in the towel.
That's right. Well, in fact, now, according to the order, they can't deny the room based upon religious viewpoint. And that's common. Of all places, a library ought to have the opportunity for multiple people to use the facilities for various kinds of perspectives. In fact, the very first case that I remember ever filing against a library was against West Allis, Wisconsin. And in that library, they had a room that says you can't have discussions regarding political or religious perspectives. And so the individual wanted to have a meeting there, talk about creation, origins of the universe, and he wanted to pray and open up the event with prayer and have a Bible there and talk about things from the Bible as well as from the fossil record. And they said, no, you couldn't pray and you couldn't have the Bible. We ended up filing a lawsuit. Ironically, the name of this room was called the Constitution Room. And in this room, it actually had a display of the United States Constitution. And so it was very fun actually doing the deposition, because when I was doing the deposition of the library director, we actually had checked out some books on different political topics and even religious topics. And I said, can we read this in the library? Yes. And it's a library book that you have? Yes. And can I talk to a friend that comes by about what I just read in your own library book?
Yeah.
Yes. But if I take this library book that talks about religion, Christianity, and go into the community room and want to talk to other people about it, I can't do it. That's correct, because it would be violating our policy. Of all places, you couldn't talk about Christian viewpoints in the Constitution Room. They resisted that, and we ended up getting a federal court order finding that that particular policy was unconstitutional.
Well, why do you suppose Liberty Counsel has been around since 1989? You've had cases, case after case like this, but it seems to me that we're seeing a steep increase in these types of religious discrimination cases. Why do you suppose we're seeing a rise in hostility toward religious freedom?
Well, I think it's two reasons, and obviously there's just apathy or ignorance. They think that this is what they have to do, that if you have some kind of religion or proselytizing, whatever that is, and proselytizing, all that it means is persuading.
Yeah.
So you can't persuade from a Christian perspective, but you can persuade from a secular perspective. The fact of the matter is, I think some of it is just ignorance, and they get these draft policies that run around the country. They go to these different library association meetings, and here's a draft policy, and this is a form, and then they put it in their own library. And there's obviously the other perspective, and that is they just don't want Christian viewpoints there in the library. Either way, it's unconstitutional. And, we actually had an article written about Liberty Counsel with regards to a library case that we had a number of years ago, and it was sent. It was in the publication of the National Library Association. So all the libraries in the country that subscribed to this would get this publication. And it specifically said, you better change your policies if they have these restrictive clauses because they're unconstitutional. So there's no excuse why these libraries would still have it. I would encourage people to go to your local public library or libraries, however many you have. Ask them for their facilities use policies. And if they have a clause in there restricting political or religious speech, give us a call, email it to us, scan it to us. We want to make sure that it's cleaned up.
Well, the bottom line is that libraries like this need to start complying with the United States Constitution and get away from this magic banner of so-called separation of church and state, which has nothing to do with the United States Constitution. They need to follow the nuanced language of the United States Constitution.
No question. And certainly Christian viewpoints are permissible in otherwise areas that are allowing various other kinds of secular viewpoints as well. Give Liberty Counsel a call at 1-800-671-1776 or go to our website at lc.org. Here's something that you can do. I would encourage you to go to your local library. You can either go down there personally or go online. Oftentimes these policies are right online. So go down. Either way, find out what the library usage policy is for their community or common rooms. If it has a clause that says you can't talk about politics or religion, give Liberty Counsel a call, get that to us. We'll make sure that that policy is cleaned up. Also, you can order several books. We've got a series now of the Patriot's Handbook, and the Patriot's Handbook has both on the Constitution as well as public schools and pastors in churches, what pastors in churches can do during this political season. order them from Liberty Counsel. Ask for the Patriots Handbook series. That's 800-671-1776 or lc.org.